Hello and welcome to Psychology Demystified. Today's video is the last of the three and it's going to be about ambiverts. So today is ambivert day. Ambiverts are the ones who are in the middle. So they either lean more towards the introversion side or more towards the extroversion side, but don't solidly fit into all the categories. So they don't tick all the boxes. They are smack in the middle. Ambiverts are pretty much the best of both worlds. The introversion world and the extroversion world. In simple words, an ambivert possesses extroverted traits and introverted traits in a balanced measure. There are some ways of knowing if you fall into the ambivert category. There's a high likelihood that you're an ambivert if you're a good listener and a good communicator. They're equally well skilled at engaging in a conversation with a large group or diving into a smaller conversation with a much smaller group. Introverts tend to observe and to listen more, whereas extroverts tend to talk more. Ambiverts, on the other hand, know when to speak up and when to listen. There's a quote I found by Daniel Pink that was pretty cool, and he actually said that ambiverts know when to speak up and when to shut up, when to inspect and when to respond, when to push and when to hold back. And I loved his words. That was Daniel Pink. He described them to a T. So an ambivert is someone who might open a meeting because that's what they're required to do at that time. They may open up the meeting and then take a step back and let everyone else in the meeting have a talk. Now remember how I talked about phone conferencing and video conferencing that has now become the new craze? Extroverts love it. Introverts hate it. Ambiverts, neutral. It depends on what kind of mood you find them in. Ambiverts do well fitting into the situation or fitting to the person that they're dealing with, and this comes quite naturally to ambiverts. They don't have to really think about it. For example, if you're on a road trip, this is a scenario that you might be in. If you're in the car with an extrovert, they'll want to make small talk. If you're in the car with an introvert, they'll want to put in their earphones. So AirPods in. But an ambivert will observe and figure out which situation they find more relaxing at that particular time. So they're comfortable in either situation. Ambiverts love to live in the world of imagination. Ambiverts are considered to be psychologically ambidextrous, which means they can either use the introverted traits or the extroverted traits based on the situation. Ambiverts are very comfortable in social situations, but they also like their alone time at home. They are perfectly smack in the middle. Ambiverts are a great mix because they need to have a full amount of socializing, but then they also need a full amount of time to sit in solitude and to reflect. Ambiverts make their decisions based on that particular situation. An extrovert, if someone calls and says, "I'm having a party, let's go." Extrovert, out there, gone. Introvert, thinking of an excuse to stay in. What excuse can I give so I can stay in? Ambivert, on the other hand, weighs the pros, weighs the cons of going out, and then could decide to do either one. Ambiverts are often considered to be the ones who show the most empathy. An ambivert is able to listen, to see where you're coming from, and to show you that they understand where you're coming from. A way to know whether you're an ambivert is to see how you react to situations where a friend brings you an issue. If you're an extrovert, you're more likely to hear what they're saying, but try and give a solution right away. If you're an introvert, you'll be a great listener and you'll sit back and not necessarily say much. If you're an ambivert, you will do both. You will listen, you will weigh the pros and cons of their situation, and then give a well thought out answer to help them figure out what the situation is. Ambiverts are the ones who can tell when someone is out of their element, or they do very well being the ones who break awkward silences. So if they're in a group and notice an awkward silence, an ambivert, knowing how an introvert would feel and knowing how an extrovert would feel, finds a way to kind of mesh the two and to diffuse any situations. So ambiverts are like our peacemakers and our bring everyone together person. Because of ambiverts being comfortable in either zone, they are the ones who are the best at making compromises because they see both sides to every story. Ambiverts do very well being the life of the party, but also during the same party can find a way to engage in a very meaningful, deep conversation with someone in a corner where they help them solve a situation. So they can actually balance both really well. So they do very well in a big group, talk, have fun, be loud, be boisterous, and then a few minutes later, they're in a corner, quiet with someone, having a deep conversation. Very interesting to be able to do both and to function that way. Ambiverts are also pretty good at knowing when to trust people. Extroverts trust very easily, and that's why they open up so easily about themselves. Introverts, on the other hand, are more wary, so they'll watch you, observe you for quite some time before they open up to you. An ambivert, on the other hand, will know exactly when it's time to trust you. So they work on their instincts really well, and a lot of them find that their instincts steer them the right way. When it comes to work situations, ambiverts do really well either working alone or working in a group. Extroverts love to work in groups because then they want to share out loud. Introverts kind of want to work alone and just leave me alone and just be quiet. Ambiverts can work solo, but then work with someone else at the same time. So they do a very fine balance of being a team player. Ambiverts find themselves being very comfortable around a different range of personalities. That's why they end up blending really well. Because if they end up meeting an extrovert who wants to talk, sometimes they can then decide to dial it back and let that extrovert shine. If they come across an introvert who is not really willing and keen to engage, then they end up taking that leadership role into the relationship and the friendship and then bring that introvert out of their shell. So they do very well adapting to different personalities based on the situation. Which means then that ambiverts make very good followers and very good leaders. They can balance so easily between two worlds, which means that being with people can energize them, but being with people can also deplete their energy. Another thing about ambiverts is that because they're both extrovert and introverted, sometimes they don't know which one of those two will give them the energy that they're craving. And because of that, sometimes they can come across as indecisive. And the reason why indecision becomes a thing is because they always weigh the pros and cons of situations. They see the pros and the cons of going. They see the pros and the cons of staying home. Both of them are equal. And because none of them is balancing out the other, then this leads to confusion and trying to figure out which one do I want to do. The thing is, though, that if they end up going out and their body actually wanted to stay home, what they find is once they've gone out, they quickly become irritable and annoyed at the fact that they actually did come out. And then sometimes, if they decide to stay home, they might find themselves getting really bored about the decision to stay home and then wonder whether they should have gone out instead, even though they know that there's a book that they've been dying to read. So it's a very interesting space to be. Do I go out? Do I not? Extrovert knows I'm going out. Introvert knows I'm staying in. Ambivert is not totally sure, not all the time. And then they find themselves having an internal conflict. Because of who and how they are, ambiverts have to work very hard to understand that they're ambiverts and know that there are sometimes that they'll be hardwired to want to go out and also understanding of themselves when they decide that they're done, where their energy is depleted and they don't want to hang out with anyone and just want to stay home. So ambiverts have to be super aware of what kind of mood they're in and what phase they're going through, so that they can also be kind to themselves and treat themselves as they should. Thank you so much for watching, dear ambivert, dear extrovert, and dear introvert. And I'm hoping that this helped you understand who you are, who your friends are, who your family are, who your acquaintances are, who your bosses are, just so that you can be able to figure out how to understand each other in ways that you probably did not do so before. Remember to be kind because it costs you nothing. And hugs and kindness always. Stay safe.